So on today's episode, we're going to listen firsthand of the story of a sex toy direct-to-consumer entrepreneur. It's a great episode you don't want to miss, so do stay tuned. So welcome to the 2X E-commerce podcast show. I'm your host, Kunle Campbell. This is the podcast dedicated to rapid growth in online retail. We talk about D2C stories, from entrepreneurs whenever we can. And on today's episode, I spoke with Brian Sloan, who is the founder of a sex toy called Autoblow. He's had several rejections from several podcasters saying that, his story is not appropriate for their audiences. But this is a direct to consumer story. It has limitations. He can advertise on Facebook. We talk about how he's used press, PR, to really amplify above the line awareness of his brand and actually drive tangible sales, what ad networks look like, and how he just stays on his feet as an inventor, the importance of product launches, throughout the success of his 8-figure brand. This is a 10 million, is a very healthy 8-figure, brand. They don't do social media. He is an attention hawk for his brand, not himself. He has very libertarian views in terms of freedom. And he talks about why you should never consider Amazon unless if you want to be, a serf, or a slave to a landlord, essentially. And direct to consumer really is about freedom, really. And so it's a terrific episode. We talk a lot about his story, when he stopped caring. Actually, he's never really cared about what people thought about, how he started out in the niche, which I think is totally unexplored in D2C. There is a bit of a taboo. It's a bit of a taboo subject, especially for men. And I think we all should know that it's a thing, it's a niche. This is a very lucrative, vertical, and he's explored it. The pandemic helped the business, and it's been a grind for him, over the last 10 or so years. We talk about his acquisition stack, what retention looks like, and what performance actually looks like around the clock. He only has about two employees, and they're pulling in 8 figures plus. So enjoy this episode. If you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast, on YouTube. In fact, if you're listening to this on a podcast app, open up your YouTube app now, search for 2X E-commerce and subscribe to the show. Support us. So we're on YouTube. If you have iTunes, remember to leave us a review. Any kind of review would be very helpful. I've taken on board negative and positive reviews and, taken action essentially towards improving the show. Brian gives it all. He shares so much. He's happy to share his story. Enjoy this episode. Very down to earth person. Enjoy it. Cheers. Welcome to the 2X E-commerce podcast show. I'm your host, Kunle Campbell, and this is the podcast dedicated to rapid growth in online retail. Now, if you work in marketing or you're a founder, essentially every episode of this podcast is geared to helping you sell more, directly to your customers. So every week I interview an expert or a founder of a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business or a representative from a best-in-class e-commerce SaaS product to just give you just inspiration, tips, tactics, their strategies that enable them, grow to where they are. So you can essentially just, get inspiration. So if you're looking to grow metrics such as conversions, average order value, repeat customers, your audience size, and ultimately sales, this is the right podcast. Now, speaking of which, today's episode is a D2C business owner with a bit of a twist, and I think what you're going to learn from this episode is if your hands or your arms are tied behind your body, essentially behind you, you still can move, in what you do. That's a lesson I want to take you guys through, because in the industry in which Brian Sloan, who is the guest of this podcast, operates in, they're very the limitations. They can't advertise on Facebook, for instance, but they figured out a way to grow to 8 figures over time, consistently, and how to garner press. We're going to talk all about that. And that is what I want us to sort of pick, that, we'll always find a way. And Brian is one of those entrepreneurs who's found a way in all of the stuff he's done. Anyway, I'm just going to read a bit of an intro, to you guys, and then we'll take it from there. So Brian is a sex toy inventor and entrepreneur who over the past 12 years has bootstrapped his way to 8-digit yearly sales with a global dispersed team. Working from home and from cafes, he's used a unique blend of technology and media savvy to push his Autoblow device into the minds. I love that, minds, not hands, or minds of millions of men, and into the homes of hundreds of thousands. His company combines offline and online retail backed by deep manufacturing experience, all heavily influenced by 10 years he spent living in China. Did I also forget to mention that he has only 2 full-time employees and an army of part-timers around the world? Brian, it's an absolute pleasure having you on the 2X e-commerce podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to tell my story to your listeners.
Brilliant. I probably haven't done you sufficient justice with the intro. Would you mind taking the next minute or two, just giving us a quick intro, about you specifically, Brian Sloan?
Yeah, I'll just give a kind of from beginning to end here in a minute, and then we'll dig into whatever you like.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So after university, I went to law school here in the U.S. While I was in law school, I saw how hard lawyers worked for relatively little money, I think. And how unscalable their work was. And luckily, a friend took me to an auction, bought something, sold it on eBay, and learned that there was another way of making money. And that turned me into a totally another direction. I later became a full-time eBay seller and moved to China, where I lived in China for 10 years. And I learned how to do my business in a remote way. Fast forward until now, we sell our Autoblow device and a few other things, mostly online, but also to retailers globally. And finally, last year, we broke through the 8-figure barrier, and this year, very strongly into the 8 figures of sales of our physical device.
Congratulations with the breakthrough. So essentially, you're a lawyer. You're a lawyer who was just attracted to e-commerce just due to the limitations of being a lawyer. Essentially, it was not really your thing, and you've moved from marketplaces because we talked about the fact that you've also tried Amazon for certain other products, white label products, into D2C, direct to consumer. Now, do you still do marketplaces at the moment, or are you solely focused on your D2C offering, which is Autoblow?
Yeah, so we don't sell on Amazon or in the U.S. market or eBay, and we don't allow our resellers in the U.S. market to sell on those marketplaces. We do have our resellers sell on marketplaces in Europe and in Canada. But for us, we focus in the U.S. market on our direct-to-consumer website, and we sell directly. We self-distribute to a lot of chains and stores, and we sell to distributors as well in Canada and Europe. But we completely prohibit anyone else in the U.S., and we do not do it ourselves. We do not sell on Amazon or any marketplaces.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Yeah. Let's get back to your backstory. How did you stumble, upon, the sex industry? There's every single category or subcategory in D2C and in direct to consumer e-commerce space is being talked about, whether it's CPG goods, consumables, to selling mattresses. Everybody's talking, everybody's excited about it. But there is what you've done in the sex industry is not really talk. You talk about it. You get the press. We're going to talk about the press coverage, but in the sex space, from your perspective, are there other D2C offerings? I'm not saying you should mention other competitors, but what does the D2C landscape look like in the sex industry?
Well, I think that's
or vertical?
It's a good place to start because it's one of the things that attracted me to this niche in the first place. Back when I started in 2008 or even 2007, the job of the brand was to sell at a low profit margin to distributors, and the distributors then sold at a high profit margin, I think, to the retailers, and the retailers sold at a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6x margin to 600% kind of margin to the consumer. So the brand was at the bottom of the chain. At the time, there was only one brand that didn't do that. That was Fleshlight. That's our sort of main competitor. Fleshlight was early to understand the importance of going direct to consumer. But even still, I'll say this is 13. I've been doing this 13 years. I think other than us and Fleshlight, I think although by now most brands do have a direct to consumer presence, I'll bet that still most of their revenue comes from this sort of lower margin profit sales to distributors and retailers.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting, very, very interesting. So it's a blue ocean essentially, and there's not much competition. Well, there's not much D2C competition in the space.
There's increasingly more. There's certainly now more than there was. But I think for if you look at how much money people are spending in this industry and what the competition landscape looks like, I think there's still kind of a mismatch. And that's due, I think, obviously, to the nature of the products.
Okay. Makes sense. So you describe yourself as a sex toy inventor. So what does the product development look like? How do you do your market research? How do you get feedback, on the products? How many iterations? This is the second iteration of Autoblow. What does it look like?
No, this is, I think we're in our maybe sixth iteration, at least a public one. So the ideas are generated from me. I understand the competitive landscape. So I have ideas, and I've learned over the years how to turn those ideas into physical products. So at the beginning for Autoblow 2, at the beginning we were selling a white label product back in 2008. And after we sold 30,000 of them. And I thought, if I could make it much better, if I could fix the things that are wrong with it, we could, really make a strong business out of this. So the first part of that process was hard. I lost 2 years. I tried to make this product in Taiwan in a factory that didn't make sex toys before. And ultimately, I lost almost 2 years of time with a development that just didn't pan out, that I sunk a bunch of money into. I later met just by chance at an adult industry at the sex toy trade show in Las Vegas. These couple of guys, we started talking. I said, "Oh, I live in China." They said, "Oh yeah, we live in China. We have a factory there." We sort of became friendly. And those ultimately are the guys who I worked with. At the beginning, that factory itself had an R&D department that was capable of helping me turn my idea into reality. But as the product has become more sophisticated, that factory still adds a lot of value in taking our concepts and reducing costs and, doing everything it takes to make them manufacturable. But I have gone to outside firms. Basically, I like the profile of a company that's like a 2 to 5 person company. There's a lot of these small companies out there with a couple PhD guys. Most of those kind of small companies will have at least 1 or 2 guys who have a PhD in some kind of engineering. And one company for Autoblow, so for Autoblow AI, that company was in Canada. And, I don't know, over a year or so, I just gave them sort of, here's my idea of how that product will work. Here's how I see that going. And then they set about, prototyping it. So really, it's sort of my... like if you think of, I gave him like a big lump of clay, like there's my ideas. It needs to do all of these things and it should work kind of like this. Then those guys can refine it. And then the factory's step is sort of the final step of refining that. And you'll find that if there's money, right, the factories and firms can, if there's enough money to refine ideas, then people are happy to do that. People have been happy to do that for me.
Super interesting. Super interesting. So it's like a two-step, process with your partners who help you reiterate, and then from this is a funny question, but how do you know what to improve? Is it a combination of you testing or customer feedback? Do you have like a customer feedback process, automatic process where customers are able to effortlessly give you feedback, and then that's just put into process, and then you kind of figure out what's common, what's a common issue.
In our field, the customers are not shy about complaining about things that they don't like. So just reading the customer service emails, normally I get my information from the customer service emails, and I know when we get emails about a certain thing, it's very clear that this thing needs to be fixed in the next iteration. People say, "Oh, it's too tight, it's too loose, it's too fast, it's too slow." We often get conflicting feedback. Like the number one complaint might be like, "This is too fast," and then the number two complaint is, "This is too slow." So sometimes the feedback is not that easy to follow, but mainly I listen to the feedback from the customers, from the customer service emails, and from our customer service department, and basically, I test the prototypes myself, and I pretty much I trust my judgment almost completely on that. But we do have, so when we launched Autoblow 2, and now when we launched Autoblow AI, and we have a new version coming out maybe at the end of this year, there are some customers who are some customers like to communicate with us more than others. Okay, I call these like super customers. When they send emails about something, they don't just send like, "I didn't like this thing." They send an email like, "I didn't like this and this, but I did like this," like a thoughtful email. And those people who send us thoughtful emails become our testers. So in this case, we have, when we make a new product, we make 30 samples, and then we send those samples. I recruit those testers from the people who sent us reasonably detailed, thoughtful emails about things they liked or didn't like. And even if they didn't like something, sending an angry email in all caps like, "I hate this thing, this is not worth communicating." But if someone sends us, like really a couple of, strong paragraphs on why they didn't like something, I like this kind of customer, and then we recruit them to be testers for the next version.
Super, super interesting. They get the products and then they give you feedback, and that there is a structure, to all of this. Okay. So, you essentially stumbled into the sex industry by just selling, white label products. Essentially, you were, selling on marketplaces, and then you figured out, okay, there might be a demand here, and you started D2C.
Yeah, we started with latex fetish wear first on eBay. We were importing latex fetish wear, and then we learned about special demand from big and tall people with particular fetishes. The fetish wear, selling fetish wear on a marketplace that was just eBay at the time, opened my eyes to the entire industry. But actually, we started doing the original Autoblow. The first product actually was the original Autoblow. That was a white label product. After that, we did expand, not with Autoblow, but with other products onto the marketplaces. But the marketplaces became let's not call them the marketplaces. There's only one marketplace. It's called Amazon. It became an increasingly terrible place to do business with random rule changes, people attacking your listings. A customer would complain, "Oh, there's a hair on this item," and we would write back to Amazon, "There's not a hair because it's sealed at the factory. There's not a hair on the item." And then imagine it became like I was living in a dystopian future when if you would deny a complaint to Amazon, they would keep your listing off. And then you find out pretty quickly, wait a minute, the only way to get our listing back on is to admit fault and apologize and write them a plan. Like this, once we saw, oh my God, this is the system we're working in, there's no way I'm going to continue my life working in that system.
Yeah. And the sad thing is like, someone who, got a refund off the back of that, lying essentially could share in a subreddit or some forum with, other dishonest people essentially, and then it becomes some sort of game essentially, and that winds a lot of businesses out of Amazon.
And actually what I learned selling on Amazon, the reason that we stopped, you cannot. I lived in China for 10 years. The Chinese factories have a very high-tech way. It involves people. It's both low-tech and high-tech at cheating at getting reviews. I mean, going to lengths that no American companies would go through, setting up Facebook groups, like managing with people like thousands and thousands of fake reviews. It needs a room of people managing the level of fake reviews. So you learn that that's who you're up against to get your listings at the top of the, we used to have a dildo or two at the top of the dildos category. That was good for us. But then, anyway, long story short, I cannot cheat at the level of Chinese factories. And if it's a game where I know I'm going to lose, then I'm out. I'll do something else. And you can see on Amazon now, the entire platform has been taken over with these outrageous, you could look at a review of a keychain and it has 80,000 reviews with videos like showing it. Like, you think those people really made videos? No, it's because they were each given like $15 to make a video. So anyway, I'm out. not for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. There are better ways to build a brand. Yeah. Speaking of China, what was your experience? You spent 10 years there. Did you travel around China, or did you what was your experience in China over 10 years?
It was an incredible place to live at that time. I think it's changing a lot. I know a lot of people who also left. Mm-hmm. But I traveled really all over the world while I lived there, but I traveled a lot around China. It was like living in a business school. I didn't go to business school. I went to law school, but I think that living there and having the conversations with people I had over those years basically was like living 10 years in a business school. I saw many, many different kinds of companies start and fail. Things were happening in China at a huge scale. Someone might start here. Oh, I'm starting in Seattle. I live near Seattle. I'm starting a cafe chain. Our goal is to have 5 cafes in like 3 years. Like, you can meet people there who are like, our goal is to have like 13,000 cafes in 5 years. So it's just a different level of scale there. And, really meeting people, I think, who are from all over the world was a key benefit. When you meet people in America or maybe in the UK, those are people from whatever country and they moved there and now they're like American people or they're UK people. But in China, it's like actually like you meet like Danish people who are actually Danish people, not Danish people who decided to move to America. Like, it's very different. So I learned a lot from a lot of people there, and that environment was really, really ripe for, I think, growing my business remotely.
Yeah. So what cities did you live in, and what is the mindset? You talk about the fact that it was like business school. Is every expatriate, Western to be particular, very business minded, or a few people a bit hippie, or is it just a combination of both, where they're just very curious about culture?
I think that the communities of those different groups sort of separate themselves naturally. So I lived in Beijing always. And the kind of foreigner, there's different kinds of foreigners. There's foreigners who, the Shanghai foreigners are different. They wanted a very easy life. They moved to Shanghai. The people who self-selected to move to Beijing were different because it was less easy to live in Beijing. I'd say it was more real than living in Shanghai. And there were a lot of business people. There were embassy people and business people sort of in this community. There were English teachers in a different community. Really, the communities didn't mix. There wasn't much of a hippie sort of bunch, at least in Beijing. Maybe you could find those people in some more...
in Thailand.
In Thailand, but you wouldn't move to China to be a hippie. It's like noisy and there's pollution and it's intense. But definitely there were events, there'd be events at embassies, there'd be talks, there are a lot of ideas. There's things changing in the society. So there'd be, you go to a talk at an embassy about some, healthcare system of China. You'd really learn something. And even at night, be at a bar at 1 a.m. talking about your business with people, learning from each other. So I think it was unique in that people were really willing to share. But also I think they're willing to do so because, you're a foreigner in China, I'm a foreigner in China. And of course, there's also the Chinese community in China. It is China. So there were a lot of Chinese people mixed in the foreigner community who spoke English or who had lived or studied abroad, who sort of more naturally came to the foreigner world in Beijing, who were part of it.
Did you learn Mandarin?
Yeah, I learned like medium level. Chinese. I could, argue with my management about something about the community. Like, it really tends to be in the things I needed for my life. I couldn't, like, even then when my Chinese was at its best, I couldn't do dinner with like 5 Chinese people at once. That was too much. But, one-on-one could have like an okay chat.
Is it a handicap to not learn, to not speak in China in 2021?
I think it depends what you want to do. A lot of my friends there spoke like a native speaker and could read Chinese, almost like a native speaker. But a lot of their businesses required that of them, and they had a professional advantage from that. Me, I was working with, a guy in Romania and people all over the world from the cafe there. I didn't need it, but it was nice just in my daily life that I needed to get around, society. So,
Would you suggest listeners, so some listeners are entrepreneurs, that they have time, that they don't have attachments, basically like family attachments, and they're looking to travel the world. Yeah. Would you still recommend China to them in 2021?
Yeah. Look, the best thing, everything's going to be made in China forever. So the thing I always tell people, especially when they're interested in making physical products, I mean, just seeing where the world is truly growing, I think it's valuable to spend some time in China to understand the mentality of whatever, Chinese government, Chinese people. But for anyone who wants to make a physical product, the first step I always tell them is to find the trade fair in China that's related to your products, or maybe even the Canton Fair, which is the largest trade fair. It has different, phases with every kind of product. But let's say, I think there's a market in wherever you live in Brazil. You think, there's not that many, whatever, like microscope importers. Maybe I want to like make my own brand of microscope. Fantastic. You find when's the science trade fair with all the microscope booths. You go there and you see what's available, and you talk to the factories. You talk to 30 different factories right there. You find 2 of them then from there that you want to go visit at their actual factory. So going to a trade show is, I think, the most valuable thing anyone could ever do, especially going to Canton. If you just, I want to sell products, but I don't know which kind of products, the Canton Fair is amazing. It's enormous buildings, bigger than any buildings you've ever seen or imagined that a building could stand up that's this huge. Multiple floors of just thousands and thousands of booths with, different products.
Products, yeah. And then you mentioned your partner in Romania, who you met. Yeah. So while you were in Beijing, did you hook up with him? Did he come over to China? And are you still working together?
Yeah. So at first, the first thing I did in China was I hired a Chinese firm to make this e-commerce website to sell the latex direct to consumer. And they made it in this language. I'm not an engineer, but it was an ASPX. That was like the...
ASPN, yeah, okay. ASPN.
And so then when I had to get it was broken. I had to get it fixed. And everyone I went to was like, first of all, no one even uses that anymore. Why did they do that? And I'm like, I don't know. But it turns out this language was still very popular in China then. So I went on, a friend there told me about a freelancing website. Then it was called Get a Freelancer. And I found this guy, Alex, in Romania. And he, him and his friends, at first he told me that he was 24. And then as we got to know each other more, I found out that he was still in high school. He was 17. And him and his friends were learning how to code by getting projects that, maybe they didn't know how to do, and then learning how to do them and giving people a price that...
Figure it out.
Yeah. So, after I realized how good he was, I decided to go to Romania for a trip to meet him. And I went there in, I think, 2008. And it was great. I went to this town he lived in. He didn't go attend, I think, much of his senior year of high school. He had all kinds of excuses, medical excuses, and he would be at home getting jobs on this freelancing website all day. And so we started to, actually meet each other then. And from that time, where they were working on this first website for me, we've met every, say, 3 or 4 months for 2 or 3 weeks since then. Either I would go to Romania to meet him, or he would come to China to stay with me, to work with me. So, it's needed. Even though we're remote, we do solidify that with several weeks-long meetings every year.
In person.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. And so he's your CTO essentially, your tech.
Yeah, I think you'd call him the CTO. So basically, the company has sort of the unique thing is that he's also really good on the marketing side and understanding which technical implementations can help us on the marketing side. So, he controls the e-commerce websites developed by him. We have systems that control wholesale and when to reorder and import stuff from the logistics company. Like all of our systems he's created, and also he taught himself how to be an electrical engineer. And he worked side by side with the company I hired to program this chip that the new product has. So he learned how to write firmware for like embedded devices as well. Yeah,
it's incredible. So is he an employee or a partner?
I guess he's an employee, but he makes money like a partner. I mean, it's just fair.
Okay.
He makes more than.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Right. I learned a ton, about China. So right now, how did you start not really caring? I was going to say give an F, but I'll just I'll taper it down. How did you stop caring? Obviously you started to do a lot of press. I want to get into the press coverage thing, but to get to the press, to go to crowdfunding, you raised £250,000 or I think almost $400,000 on Indiegogo. All this requires you being upfront with the, outside of the sex industry. You could easily, hide, in the sex industry. Just recently, the founder of Pornhub got a first picture on, I think it was on the Sunday Times, and due to his wife complaining, essentially, it was just keeping it really, really, really down low. Despite the, how popular his platform is. But how did you take that step and say, hello world, this is what we do and I'm ready? Was there a mindset shift? Did you always, operate in the open?
Yeah.
Or were you, did you just make a shift?
When I started doing the latex stuff, the easiest way for me to get views on that was to put on the rubber suit. I'm not a latex fetishist myself. So what I did is I put on the suits and went, to downtown Chicago or to shopping malls, and I walked around and I had someone follow me with a video camera, and I put those on YouTube. Wow. I did that in my early days. So, I didn't feel I just don't feel any shame or embarrassment about doing that. And so when it came time to, do the crowdfunding campaign for Autoblow 2, I realized that all of the brands, are often, I think let's say every brand now except one. There's one or two now. There's some women's brands that are represented by the female entrepreneur, but that's a recent thing. At the time that I did my crowdfunding campaign, all sex toy companies, if there were humans associated with them, were either some fake like porn people, or some kind of spokesperson or a marketing person. I mean, none of the brands were personal. And I thought, look, the easiest thing I can do to sell this Autoblow 2 on Indiegogo is just to make the video. Like, imagine all the steps that would go into it if I had to find someone else to try to be me. That's just a lot of effort. It doesn't make any sense. So I just did it myself. And actually, that was part of why that campaign went viral. I think, number one, the video was kind of cringy, especially in hindsight. But what the media picked up on about that was, whoa, this is the actual guy. He's willing to put his face on that. That's a new thing in sex toys, that there's no shame associated with that. And number four, it's cringy. And number five, people are actually buying this thing. So there were five ingredients. And then I doubled down on that, and I continued to use myself because I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of in buying that kind of thing. There's a movement now. You can see it in mainstream media that when women buy sex toys, they're somehow empowering themselves. And this is, pushed pretty hard.
Not the same for men.
Yeah, pretty hard in mainstream media that masturbation is empowerment for women, which I don't know if that's true or not. But certainly then it must be the same for men, right? Although I've never phrased it that way, but I wouldn't say that there's nothing empowering about doing that. But it is a natural and normal thing, and it should be an acceptable thing. So I just haven't been embarrassed to put myself out there, and now, yeah, it's true that now my life has changed. I have kids. Have neighbors, have a house and stuff. So before I did that, I lived in China, I lived abroad, I lived other places. But yeah, now I'll see what that's like to, be the face of a masturbation device company with kids and neighbors and PTA and everything. And I'm sure I'll find out that there are some people who might not like that, but I literally could not care less.
Yeah, you're solving problems, and you're not hurting anyone. So, that's it. Okay, so in regards to media, you seem to have mastered the craft of garnering attention. You have, from quite a niche kind of product, for obviously the sex industry, you've managed to get press a lot more from Business Insider, Huffington Post, Men's Health, Gizmodo, and a ton of other media outlets. What is your strategy? Are you front center in this campaign? Do you have a press team? You mentioned you have only 2 full-time staff employees. So what is it? Do you hire an agency? How do you get this press?
So
how do you do it?
Basically, I only come up with product ideas that I know the media will be interested in writing about. So I wouldn't launch a boring product that doesn't have something interesting about it. I would never launch a marketing campaign that doesn't have some kind of significant, globally interesting feature to it. So, and by example, what I mean is we had a number of genital-themed beauty contests. Turned out we had a vaginal beauty contest that went viral all over the world and ended up with Elite Daily, which is now defunct, making a short documentary about that because of the level of public interest. And so once I get some,
who are the contestants for the
pageant? Basically, we put up a website with $10,000 of prize money. And the women uploaded photos of themselves, and people from all over the world voted from 1 to 10 stars on each photo, and the winners would get replicated onto the sleeves of our products for Autoblow. And so again, it was one of those things like if no one comes to it, then it's a nothing. It's a nothing thing. But suddenly when, oh my God, there's this thing, it's outrageous and it's popular and people are actually submitting photos and millions of people are visiting it, then it's news, And it's news because maybe it's news because it's terrible. Some website said this is the most terrible thing and it's in the news. Fine. You think it's terrible, that's fine. You think it's great, you think it's weird, doesn't matter. As long as it makes people feel something when they read about that, then I've done what I'm supposed to do. And it got deeper, Then I hired a statistician to evaluate the photos, and he came up with a kind of metrics for figuring out, well, why did people vote some photos higher than others? Did the voters behave differently from certain countries? Like there was Japan, I remember, was the country that didn't vote. They didn't discriminate against their own country's photos. They voted sort of fairly across all photos. But there were countries, I think Hungary, the voters from Hungary voted mainly 10s for the photos from their own country. So you learned a lot of interesting things in the data. That became another news story. And so I think the ingredient has been, the ingredient has always been, the main ingredient is for me to create something that's interesting, that people have fun with, that makes them feel something, and that is is global in its reach. I did a recent one. I made a device that connects the Autoblow to a Tesla, and I called it the Autoblow. It's just a mount for the Autoblow. So I made an infomercial for that. I wrote this commercial. I had it filmed. It's me basically on self-driving with the Autoblow, working while I'm driving. And it's feels like an old style infomercial. So of course, car companies.
You're riding on the wave of Tesla.
Yeah.
I
know people love to search Tesla. They love any Tesla news. So of course, it's not a surprise that when we contacted Jalopnik, I don't know if you're familiar. It's like one of the main car news websites, at least in the U.S. Jalopnik wrote about it. Auto websites wrote about it. Tesla people wrote about it. And it was on. There's places like 9gag or similar websites that pick up on this. So.
Yeah, there was early last year, I think, there was this big thing about the first porn video shot in a Tesla. Did that inspire you, or did your one come first? Did you inspire them?
I never heard about that. I think that's too easy. About it. Okay, I think a porn video shot in a Tesla. You mean it was self-driving or something?
Something like that. I mean,
that would be kind of a hook.
Teslas are my interest, and then that popped up. Yeah.
But no, I mean. Also, it's outrageous, and it's possible to build the thing. And we had a number of these campaigns. One time we made a stroker, but we made it to this military standard. We made it a stroker. A silicone stroker is not particularly newsworthy, but when we made it to meet some specifications so that it would be good for men in the military to use, then it's interesting, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
but do you make one of that product? Or do you make is it like a limited edition and then you sell 100 pieces and that's it? Or how does it link to commerce?
Yeah, normally those products are all sold. The Autoblow product still isn't sold yet. We wanted to actually release it as a 3D print file, but it's not clear whether you have product liability for 3D files that you release even for free to people. So it's kind of on hold. But everything else is always a product. Autoblow AI, this is our best-selling current product. And, launching a new Autoblow, not news, but being the first company to do a machine learning study of oral sex performed upon men and then releasing the science on a website. We have a website called Blowjob. It's called the BJ paper or blowjobpaper.com. That's actually the science, the machine learning science of what we did to understand the actions that occur during oral sex performed upon a man. And those are the movements that we programmed into the machine. That's interesting for people. That's news, actually. So I make sure so I come up with the ideas. I do the press releases, but I do have someone, a PR specialist. He does outreach to the journalists and has some relationships with some journalists who will open his emails, basically. So it takes two of us.
Sense. So his distribution and then your ideation, really.
Yeah.
And then that also links to product development. So you're thinking, how's the market going to react? Is it going to derive? Are we going to get emotions from the market, good or bad? And then how can we develop a product? Does that chime in well with the actual product we're developing, we're launching? And then once it happens, you send it to him to distribute. Super interesting. Okay. Now, would you say that PR is your number one acquisition channel? Is that how most people know about Autoblow and then purchase from Autoblow, or am I?
It's hard to attribute. We can only attribute some purchases from PR because some places will refuse to link. Okay, imagine you get a huge article. Yeah. And no backlink. And you're like, but then what do you see? You see Google search increasing for your brand
name.
Up.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So there's a relationship. So what we try to do over time is build brand search. So that happens from the PR. Certainly that's an ingredient. The news articles are an ingredient for that. But so is we advertise on porn networks. And that also isn't particularly profitable to do as to the direct sales, but it is profitable once we've done that for years and years and years. Then people start. You might not be in the market for an Autoblow today, but you may have seen or maybe you don't, or maybe when you're using Pornhub, maybe you've seen our ad. We don't do it in the UK actually, but if you've seen that 30 times over the past couple of years, and you're like, oh, that's that thing again. When you're finally in the market for the product, then you think about Autoblow. So that process builds, and then we do Google AdWords, and we do we have our products also in physical stores. I think some people see the product in stores. That's kind of, I view that every product that's in a store, that's an impression, whether the person buys it or not in the store.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it helps having the product with good distribution in stores. And also there's some SEO. If you just search for, like, our product's called Blowjob Machine if you search for that, you'll find our product. So it's a mix of things. And many of the sales we also do some YouTube. I don't like to call that influencer marketing, because I definitely don't. I don't advertise with like influencers. I wouldn't call those people influencers, but I'd call them kind of, maybe they're comedians. They're I only advertise with some YouTubers that I identify with, that I like their stuff. And it's not like, some guy on a yacht, with hot girls like saying to buy the Autoblow, but there are some comedians and people I identify with that I've paid to do, paid placements or videos about Autoblow. So it's mixed.
So it all comes together eventually, and that's leading to the consistent, 8-figure, revenue. What's the split D2C versus distribution now?
I think it's about
from a percentage standpoint.
Our main business is still a direct-to-consumer business. Maybe it's a third or less to offline retailers, but I like selling it to offline retailers because it's in many cases frictionless, especially to distributors. A distributor in Europe or Australia who buys from China direct, that's a relatively frictionless thing. And because we've created the market, the interesting thing is that because what happens is the news stories are often written in English, okay? And then websites in Europe often go for their outrageous news to the U.S. websites, and then they translate those stories and put them onto their websites. So, for example, in the U.K., there's a couple tabloid websites. It's Daily Star and the what's the other one?
Express.
Yeah, and Express.
Sun.
And the Sun. Yeah, the Sun especially. So once the Sun does one, you'll see that in Greece the next day. You'll see that in Hungary. You'll see that in Holland, translated onto their whatever kind of like funny news or tabloid news website. So, so
there's a lot of skill in getting US coverage and making that win, because that just rips out dividends in other. I was into publishing, and I used to see that some of our biggest articles will then be transcribed maybe a month after, even for some brands I work with. Super interesting, and it's all coming together. So in terms of sales, in terms of like fulfillment, how do you what do you do about fulfillment? Somebody in Dubai, for instance, who wants to buy Autoblow, do you have like where your fulfillment centers? Do you all ship from the US, China, Europe? What does it look like?
We only fill orders for distributors over a certain dollar amount from China, because it costs like $500-$600 for the export, related procedures in China. So the European distributors, of which we have 5 or 6 distributors, order from China. The Australian distributor orders from China. Everyone else gets shipped from our warehouse in the U.S. So that's a third-party warehouse. Our website's connected to them, so they ship daily our direct-to-customer orders, and then they ship our wholesale orders to the chains and stores in the U.S. and Canada and wherever if someone orders.
Makes sense.
So I don't know why, but people do still order Autoblow from Europe, shipped from the U.S., even though it's available everywhere in Europe. But I don't know if they still do.
Want to get it direct from the source.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Another question you talked about was like programmatic media buying. In the porn space, what does that look like? Is it similar to what native looks like with Outbrain, and what's the other one? Yeah, with Outbrain, what does it look like? Are they like are they ads? Proper like text ads or image ads or?
Yeah, so
what does the landscape look like?
There's a few big porn networks. One is for the network that Pornhub is in. I think that company is called Manwin, or I don't know if it's still called Manwin or now it's called I can't think of the name. But one company owns of the top, 100 websites in the world, there's probably 6 of them that are their sites. It's Pornhub, it's Xtube, it's RedTube, it's YouPorn. So anyway, there's one network that's for all of those. And yeah, you buy in that different spots. It's expensive. You need to test. We've tested all kinds of spots, tested all kinds of frequencies, you can test frequency, you can buy different spots, you can do video ads, you can do, there are, weird, they're always contacting you with a special deal, which the deals are always terrible. Like, we want to offer you this like spot, like 12, and it's only this much. And you're like, look at where's spot 12. It's a footer. Like, okay. Like, they're always contacting you with the absolute worst spots to buy with like special deals. Like, hey, you guys are such good customers. We're going to give you the shittiest spots. And then they're trying to charge too much too. And we tell them no every time and they still contact us.
Bless
anyway, so there's a number of those other networks. And those networks are, I think you can't have it. You can only play on those networks if you have a relatively high cost product, because the CPAs are very high for that kind of traffic. Yeah. So you can't sell if you're selling a $50 thing, you cannot use that method of traffic because there's no way that you could have a profitable CPA for that.
Right. So what kind of CPAs are you looking at on these platforms?
I don't know that I would say exactly what we've managed to get our CPA to, but certainly it's not reasonable to think of it as 50. I mean, you're competing against against cam websites, you're competing against subscription porn websites, and many of the let's just say that there are some master affiliates of some of those cam websites, and they might be getting $100 or $150 when someone bills $1 to their credit card for the cam website. And now I mentioned earlier that marijuana advertising, which was always prohibited, I think is open now. So the landscape is becoming
more rowdy.
Yeah, it's becoming more competitive.
Okay.
So yeah, one needs to make their money not necessarily from directly on there, but from brand exposure, and you need to have a margin built in to do that. So for low cost products, if it's not a recurring product or a high cost product, I think this method would be closed to people.
Okay. Seems like what you're doing above the line, seems to be the backbone of every other thing, because that's an impression, and then with the distribution, that's like a 3D impression in itself, in stores. So what about retention? Are there any refill options? Do customers who buy, Autoblow, need to, buy any replacements, like, when you buy blades for a shaving stick? Or do they just wait for the next version, like, how people want to upgrade a car or their phones?
Yeah, there is a sleeve. The Autoblow products use these removable sleeves, which is one of the innovations of the product, because the early versions of this kind of product, you couldn't remove the sleeve. It was very difficult to clean. Sleeves would become disgusting, so our sleeves come out. But also just naturally, even though we really try hard to make them last as long as possible, we don't engineer that in any way, but eventually you do need to replace the sleeve depending on your usage case situation. So you do need to buy sleeves, and we do have other related kinds of devices. We learned, I think, the hard way, at least for us, the sweet spot of how many products we should have. So we have a prostate massager category, but we only have 4 products. So I think websites, we found, at least in our niche, if you have 30 products in a category, it's weird. It's you either need to have like 300 or like 3, So we sort of built out a website that has only a few products in each category, an interesting one. So we have a few prostate massagers. We have some handheld masturbators that are not powered if people can't accept any noise. And we have lubricants and cleaners and some accessories as well. Okay. But not that many choices.
These are upsells.
Yeah, upsells, and for people who like the brand, we do offer a few other choices for them.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. And then finally, I think we need to wrap up now, just to be respectful of your time. It's really around like your employees. You're running an 8-figure business. Not very few e-commerce business are able to achieve this. How do you operate so lean? What does your team look like? Both internal and freelancers.
So I think we're lucky in that Alex, my partner I mentioned, he's kind of like a one-man army. There are people who do the work of one person, and then there's like the world's strongest man. He can lift like the work of 3 people, right? So he happens to be a person who's like having 3 people. He's doing the work of 3 people at once. He has the horsepower and the motivation to do that. But otherwise, he has one guy that assists him in software engineering. And we have two customer service. They need to work about half the day to do that. One of those customer service people manages our wholesale orders. So they need to process those to the warehouse, and sometimes there's trucks picking them up. There's some work to do with the logistics there. Everything else, though, is hired only for specific skill sets on specific projects, only when needed. So, for example, we're going to add some new sleeves to the website. All of the images on the website are actually 3D photorealistic renderings. So there's a guy in Russia. All that guy does, $50 an hour, is really good 3D renderings and 3D animations, sort of photorealistic animations of things. So when I need it, I just send him a message. He's on Upwork. He bills me through Upwork. And I say, need it? And he says, okay, I can do it tomorrow, or I need like a week. I can't get sometimes the things exactly when I want them. But other designers, I need a few new images. There's a guy in Argentina who does that. I'm going to need packaging for a new Autoblow. That guy is in Brazil, that I've used for many years. So I just got a new distributor in Europe. We needed translations into 8 languages of all of our product descriptions. So I just went on Upwork. I opened a project. Hey, we need all these translations. Invited some top freelancers there, and got the project done that way. So anything that we need, to be honest, when I see people who do our size business, and they have an office full of people, I honestly don't know what you could have those people do all day, because we do not have, we sell all this stuff online. We sell all to distributors. We deal with the logistics. You could have someone, for example, when we ship, we ship a lot of containers every year from China to the US. I just have someone from our shipping, DSV pretty much does that. But I guess if you really wanted to, you could tell an employee, your job is going to be handling logistics and like this thing and that thing. And this person could do nothing like 60% of the time. But
they'll get bored.
So a lot of things just come to me. Like I do a lot of stuff maybe that would be out of the role of a normal CEO. Like I did those translations. I did the translations that managed all those translators and put together this spreadsheet for this distributor. And my email box is really a mix of things. If I'm just like looking at my email now to see what's there, all kinds of like mixed things. So I think, so frankly, I don't know what a company does. I deal with a factory myself. I could have someone who's like in charge of dealing with factories for manufacturing. What are they supposed to do? For 92% of the other time, I have no idea. So I don't understand how people do what they do with so many people and why, but that is the normal way to do things, and good for them, because it's unnecessary. I mean, good for us, not good for them.
Yeah, I understand.
I really think it's unnecessary.
One point I want to make, and this would link up to your question around, what do these people do? I find a lot of these guys, these companies, invest a lot on content creation, and they just want an engine. And some other companies have figured out a way to outsource, content creation to influencers or, their customers themselves. But a lot of them have like big content creation teams, also retention teams and, acquisition teams. But what I noticed with what you're doing is you're doing less of content, because content is challenging to make with Autoblow, I would think, at least. But you're obviously doing some content collaborations. You said with YouTubers you resonate with.
Yeah.
But you've replaced that content piece quite cleverly with press.
Yeah.
With well thought out press that gets at the end of the day, we're putting out content to get attention, but you figured out a way to get attention with stories and products, integrated with each other, which is a double whammy essentially, in the sense that one, it does generate sales, and two, it generates attention.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So do you have any content creation initiatives besides the collaborations with the YouTube comedians, or is it really this press that you put your 80% focus on?
I mean, the thing about the press is that I need a new product to get it, right? Pitch. So it's not the last big one was the Autoblow stuff that happened. Like that was last summer in the middle of COVID. There's not really been any big press thing since then. So I wouldn't say that's it's not exactly dependable, but mainly I think it's that our type of product, the search for our type of product has gone up, especially during COVID, with more people wanting to buy this kind of product, and also just with more people using e-commerce. So when they're searching for it, because it's had already all these connections to on YouTube or in the news or from Google AdWords or on porn, once you come into this marketplace and you look for it, then you're going to find out about our type of product. So,
interesting. Okay, I'm just going to wrap up, Brian, with a lightning round. It's essentially a rapid fire session. I'm going to ask you about 5, maybe 6 questions. And if you could use a single, sentence to answer them, it'd be great. Ready when you are?
Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
Right. All right. Awesome. What advice would you give yourself 5 years ago?
First, it's more than a sentence, but I never give advice to anybody. I only do experience sharing. Advice is totally useless. And I always tell people to not listen to any advice, only listen to people who have direct experience on the question that you're asking, right?
What two things can't you live without?
2 things, I guess, my MacBook and a swimming pool.
Swimming pool.
I need to swim.
Do you live east or west coast? In the
I
States?
live near Seattle.
Where do you live?
Near Seattle. Need to swim though.
Okay. All right. Okay. So west. Okay. Awesome. Okay. All right. What book are you currently reading?
Positive Discipline. It's how to handle your 2-year-old, basically.
Bless. How many kids do you have?
A 2.5-year-old, and a 2-month-old.
Oh, bless. Yeah. Oh, well, you're not getting sleep. I have a 2-month-old too.
Well, really?
Okay. Yeah. I just turned 2 days ago. What are your 3 indispensable tools you use for managing your business?
We use Slack. That's really been a game changer. Alex asked me for years, please, can we move to Slack? And I was like, oh no, it seems so complicated. It's great. I love it.
It's great. It's brilliant.
So there's Slack, and there's, I think, honestly, it's our own platform that we built, where we log into one platform, and the information, this took a long time to make. All the information is married together. Our retail sales are when the stuff is ordered in China, when it comes. I guess you'd call this an ERP, except that we don't pay some company like $2,000 a month for the software. We made it, and it does exactly what we want for our business. This is very important, because figuring out when to order when there's so many moving pieces, this is one of the main mistakes that we make, is not ordering on time and having no inventory or air shipping. So I think this system is very important that we built.
Yeah. You built out a business intelligence reporting system.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, good on you. And then, what's been your best mistake to date? By that, I mean a setback that's given you the biggest feedback.
Setback that's given us the biggest feedback. I think in physical product development, of course, we've had, every time we release a new Autoblow version, of which there have been 5 or 6, what's the reason we released a new one? Because of complaints of the old one. You know, does it mean that the old one is shit? No, but it does mean that it can be improved. And so I think knowing that that everything that we sell, we're never completely happy with any release. And we always know that we're going to find out things that we need to fix. So that's, what was your question again? Oh, mistakes.
No, yeah, but best mistake to date.
Yeah, it's not even
just a setback that's giving you the biggest feedback.
I think that's not even like a setback, but it's we must continue. We must never, if we think that any product is the best thing ever, then we're never going to keep going. So I think just always knowing that, okay, we're going to release this, and then we're just going to wait for some like a couple nasty emails. Like it's never going to be perfect, you know. People, the iPhone reviews on Amazon have shitty. iPhone has shitty reviews on Amazon, so I think that should make people feel better when they get customer complaints sometimes.
All right. Okay. Very last question is, what one piece of advice can you give to online retailers or entrepreneurs listening to this now, keen on, just growing their business to 8 figures from your, from your experience? You've done it.
Detach yourself from Amazon sooner than later, because they aren't your friend, and eventually you'll be too integrated into their web to leave, and you will be like a peasant paying rent to the landlord for a little corner of his land.
That's powerful. Peasant landlord. Brian Sloan, I do not regret this session with you. It's been fantastic, and it's been an honor actually having you on. Great story. I resonate the whole China thing. And you have a great product. You're innovative. For people who want to sort of follow you, are you active on any social media networks?
Yeah, I don't use. I don't like social media. It's kind of terrible. No, I don't use Twitter or Instagram or any of this. But they could, if they want to say hello, they can go to our company website. If they just search Very Intelligent Ecommerce, it's actually the name of the company. You just search Very Intelligent Ecommerce. It's VIECI.com. If they go to contact us, it actually goes to me. And I want to thank you also. I decided a few months ago I wanted to tell my story, and clearly not because I think it's going to make people buy Autoblow, just because I really think that people can be influenced by the story, and I want to share. And most podcasts said, this will be too offensive. We can't take the risk with our audience. And I was like, yeah, we're not talking about the mechanics of using our product. We're talking about the business. And they were like, sorry, can't take the risk. So I want to thank you for understanding that this is a business story and not an offensive one, or one that people who are adults cannot handle. So you are actually, I think, different than the other people we reach out to, because we only got a few people who said, yeah, this sounds totally interesting to do. So I was dismayed by that, and I appreciate that you have let me tell my story on your podcast.
No, it's a pleasure, Brian, and it's a great story. It's D2C. You're a founder. That's what we're about, and there are many benefits to the audience. What you've done in PR, that is a masterclass in itself. Hint, hint, I'll probably invite you to a masterclass session. But yeah, what you've done with PR, given the limitations in what you do, it happens in the CBD space. But what you've managed to do has been phenomenal. So, it's a pleasure and honor. And, I hope this story, gets amplified, as it should, as it ought to.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Cheers.